Lord of the Mysteries. Chapter 402. Digging. Who is it? Klein jerked his head up to look at the door. He felt as if he were suffering from an illness. The fear of hearing the doorbell ring was identical to the symptoms he had experienced on Earth, being afraid of his cell phone's ringing. Putting down the newspaper and magazine, he looked at the empty plate which had been cleaned even of its seasonings. Then he stood up, and he walked to the door. Before he got a hold of the handle, he already knew that it was Dr. Aaron outside. "Don't you need to work?" Klein mumbled as he opened the door. "Good morning, Aaron. The fog is gray today." He smiled. Aaron was still wearing his cold expression, but there was an additional sense of anxiety and fear written on his face. He nudged his gold-rimmed spectacles and, without bothering to greet him, bluntly said, "Sherlock, I had another dream. I dreamed of Will Septon again." "Ah?" Klein almost froze. "That's not right? The real paper crane is with me, above the gray fog, while the one I folded is with the nighthawks. You're still able to dream of Will Septon with a paper crane which was poorly folded by a nighthawk? That's not scientific, no, that doesn't make mystical sense." Klein became serious and asked, "The same dream?" "No, it's not that scary this time." Aaron became a little calmer. "I dreamed about the grim cemetery. You know of it, right?" "Yes," Klein answered simply. Back then, he had caught a group of students and a mysticism enthusiast who was a complete beginner, Kapusky, engaging in a spiritual dance outside Grim Cemetery. He later received another copper whistle from the latter which could be used to summon a messenger. Aaron drew a deep breath of cold air and continued. "I dreamed of the woods outside Grim Cemetery. I dreamed of a birch tree which had a layer of bark peeled off its trunk. Will Septon was sitting underneath that tree, looking at me quietly. And then?" Klein pressed. Aaron shook his head. "The dream ended there." "What a strange matter. Has Dr. Aaron's dream got nothing to do with the paper crane?" "No, if it wasn't related, then there wouldn't have been a situation where the dream changed after the paper crane was switched. Furthermore, I also performed a divination using the paper crane above the gray fog and obtained the corresponding revelations," Klein said in a measured voice. "This is no longer within my scope of understanding. What do you want from me, Aaron?" Aaron breathed out warm air that dispersed into white mist. "I want to pay a visit to the area outside Grim Cemetery. I want to do it now, while it's still daytime. Can you protect me? I'll pay you £1. Heading over to the place that appeared in the dream now? He probably wouldn't encounter anything too strange during the day. Klein thought for a moment and said, "I can accept this request, but I suggest that you go back to the same cathedral and tell your dream to the bishop you're familiar with." Aaron agreed, then said doubtfully, "Why do you always suggest that I go to the cathedral? I know, you've explained it before, in a very logical way, that if mystical powers exist in this world, then the churches, which have been leading humanity, must be the ones with the strongest mystical powers, and if there are none, then at least we can go to the church to get psychological comfort and corresponding connections. However, why do you suggest that I go to the cathedral for something that isn't considered too strange?" Klein considered for 2 seconds, then replied seriously, "I'm a detective. I've come into contact with a lot of unusual things, so I understand the special nature of the church. I also know when to ask for help." "Really?" Aaron listened with a serious expression. The corners of Klein's mouth curled up. "Just kidding. Take it easy, Aaron. I'm going to change my clothes first. And also do the dishes." Having chatted with Aaron at the door for a long time without his thick coat, he turned rather stiff from the cold winds. Taking this opportunity, Klein went to the washroom, went above the gray fog, and divined the degree of danger for this mission. He received the answer that there was almost no risk. If he received a revelation indicating that it was dangerous, his plan was to reject the mission using the Church of Evernight as an excuse. Hillston Myriad Star Cathedral. "Sherlock, why don't you hire a maid? As a great detective, you can afford to have several servants," Aaron asked, as he led Klein to the Church of Evernight's largest cathedral in Hillston Borough. This was something that he had wanted to ask while in the carriage, but he had never found the opportunity to change the subject. Klein sighed and said heavily, "Aaron, let me tell you a story. There was a detective who hired 2 maids, a cook and an assistant, and he was doing pretty well, but one day he took over a case and successfully homed in on the murderer, who was a very savage and cruel man. He sneaked into the detective's house with the intention of revenge. The detective was a fighting expert, and in the end, he was only slightly injured, but 2 of his servants died because of him. Do you get it, Aaron?" "I see." Aaron's voice had a hint of empathy. "Sherlock, I never knew that you've had such an experience." "No, the main character has nothing to do with me. I just made up a story. It's not like I can tell you directly that I'm involved in many strange and mystical matters, and that there will always be unspeakable secrets in my house, so that it's best I don't hire any servants." Klein looked forward and let out a long sigh. The cleaning of his home was done twice a week, mostly by Mrs. Stellan Sammer's maid. She was responsible for the most basic cleaning procedures, and each cleaning cost 1 soldi. While they were talking, the 2 of them had already entered the hall of the Myriad-Star Cathedral. It was dark, quiet, and devoid of candles, completely in line with the Church of Evernight's style. At the very front of the hall was an altar engraved with a dark sacred emblem. The stars were inlaid with self-illuminating pearls, and the crimson moon was made of rubies. The rest of the hall was filled with the darkness of the night. With a single glance, he could see that the place was filled with specks of light as the crimson light illuminated the area, making the place extremely sacred. But Klein felt that this was inferior to the design used by St. Selena Cathedral in Tingen. That hall was pitch black, with only light penetrating from the front through the fist-sized holes. It resembled a starry sky, making one feel awe from the bottom of one's heart. However, there's a problem with that kind of design. At night the effect would be gone. Klein took a seat at random, took off his half-top hat and leaned on his black hardwood cane, while Aaron continued down the aisle to the confessional in search of the bishop. Sitting in such a large hall and looking at the people who were concentrating on praying, Klein's heart suddenly became tranquil. Come to think of it, this is only my 3rd time entering the Goddess's Cathedral. He let out a self-deprecating laugh. Inside the Cathedral of Serenity at Winter County, Leonard Mitchell put on his black trench coat and red gloves and entered the room of the high-ranking deacon, Crestet Casimir. "Congratulations, you have officially become a Red Glove. May the goddess bless you." Casimir drew a crimson moon on his chest. He still had his mouth covered with his high collar. "Praise the lady. The honor is mine." Leonard raised his right hand and gestured 4 points in a clockwise fashion. Casimir didn't say anything else and went straight to the point. "According to your request, I've placed you in Soast's team. He's a soul assurer and possesses a mystical item. I've already ordered someone to prepare a beyonder weapon for you that you'll need. Your team will be in charge of a devil summoning case, and you'll take into consideration certain clues to perform the search. For example, cases that have happened consecutively in Backland and matters related to a tarot ritual." "Yes, Reverend Casimir." Leonard held no objections towards the mission. "This will be the beginning of my revenge," he silently said to himself. Westboro, in the periphery of Grimm Cemetery. Klein accompanied Dr. Aaron as they took quite a while to walk around the nearby woods, coughing from time to time as a result of the falling grayish-white dust. Maybe there isn't a tree like that. Dreams can't fully reflect reality. Towards the end of the search, even Aaron was feeling a little uncertain himself. "Fortunately, I'm good at finding things." Klein pointed with his cane and said, "Let's take a look over there and make it our final effort." "All right." Aaron gasped for a breath of air. After a short walk, Aaron suddenly stopped and said, while pointing diagonally ahead, "Over there, over there." About a dozen meters away, a birch tree with a strip of bark around its trunk stripped off stood there quietly, as if it were waiting for them. "It's identical to the one in my dream," Aaron said with conviction. Klein smiled and said with some vigilance, "But there's no LOTM." Aaron got close to the birch tree, frowned for a while, Then he suddenly pointed to the side of the tree and said, "Back then, Will Septon was sitting here, and he was pointing at the mud below him with his finger." Pointing at the mud below him? Klein stood at the side, looking down at the almost unwithered grass. "You want to dig it up?" Aaron nodded. "We've already found this place, so we should confirm what's here. Sherlock, go to the cemetery and borrow 2 shovels. It's better if I stay here." "You go to the cemetery, I'm worried something might happen to you," Klein said cautiously. "All right." Aaron didn't refuse, and he immediately left the forest. After a while, after offering some money, he returned with 3 shovels and a tombkeeper, and they began to dig. While Klein was digging, he suddenly smelled something familiar. As the soil on the surface parted, the things below were gradually exposed. It was the body of a child that was already greatly rotten. His skin and flesh looked as if they were about to melt, and many bugs crawled in and out of his nose and mouth. Clang! The shovel fell from Aaron's hand and hit a rock. He pointed to the legs of the corpse, his mouth moving frantically, but he was unable to say a word. Klein endured the nausea and looked closely, discovering that the child's left leg was obviously missing its lower half. At the same time, Aaron took 2 steps back and fell to the ground, shouting sharply, "Will Septon! Will Septon!" It was Will Septon's corpse.